The last thing my husband ever asked of me was so simple it felt harmless until it wasn't. Naomi, David whispered, squeezing my hand with whatever strength he had left. Don't go to the retreat. Promise me. I promised. I always did. Even when curiosity clawed at me, I honored his boundaries. But a few years after he passed, curiosity stopped whispering and started shouting. I gave in, and what I found there unraveled everything I thought I knew about my husband. Only then did I understand why he'd wanted me far, far away from that place. 17 years of marriage ended in a quiet hospital room after a sudden stroke no one saw coming. At 58, I was a widow, our daughter Chloe was off at college, and my life felt like a house with all the lights turned off. While sorting through legal papers and closing accounts, I kept stumbling on hints that David had been larger, more complicated than the gentle engineer I shared a life with. 2 months after the funeral, his attorney, Mr. Harrison, asked me to stop by. The world had already resumed its routine, the grocery lines, the traffic, the emails, while I was still relearning how to take a full breath without David beside me. Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Harrison said, sliding a small velvet-lined box and a thick envelope across his desk. Your husband instructed me to deliver these only after his passing, and said the box lay an old, weighty key attached to a metal charm shaped like a leaf. The envelope bore my name and David's unmistakable hand. What is this key for? I asked. A property in Lake Arrowhead, he replied. Your husband reacquired it about 4 years ago. He wanted you to know about it only after... He didn't finish. My heart stumbled. David and I owned exactly one home. He'd never mentioned a retreat, certainly not one tied to childhood memories he always avoided. It's called the Crestwood Estate, Mr. Harrison continued. He grew up there in part. It changed hands several times, but he bought it back. That doesn't add up, I said. David shut down whenever Lake Arrowhead came up. Why buy a house, he swore off. I can't say, the attorney admitted, adjusting his glasses. But there is something else. The property's value has surged. A developer, Summit Resorts, is putting up a luxury complex nearby. They've already made multi-million-dollar offers. We were comfortable his engineer's salary, my work as a literature professor, but not secret mansion comfortable. Why the secrecy? Why the promise? I opened the letter with shaking hands. My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, I've left sooner than I hoped. Forgive the secrets. The house is yours now. I spent the last 4 years turning a dark place from my childhood into something I pray you'll find beautiful. I'm releasing you from the promise. Please go there once before deciding anything. In the study, you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting, followed by the word hope. The feeling you return to me. I love you more than words can hold. David, I pressed the page to my chest and cried for the man who was still finding ways to surprise me. One complication, Mr. Harrison said gently. David's brothers are contesting the will. Marcus claims David wasn't of sound mind when he purchased Crestwood. That's ridiculous, I said. David was sharper than anyone I know. Even so, they filed motions. Given the property's newfound value, this could become spirited. I slipped the key into my pocket. I'm going to Lake Arrowhead. 2 days later, I was parked before a carved wooden gate that read Crestwood Estate in wrought iron. The key turned with a stubborn click. The gate opened on oiled hinges. Beyond it, more than a cottage, more than a hideaway, stood a stone and timber mansion encircled by old oaks and manicured gardens. A ribbon of path guided me across lawns neat enough to shame a ruler. Everything gleamed with recent care. If David had known pain here, he had rebuilt it with tenderness. The front door's lock yielded, and I stepped into a double-height hall crowned by a stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath. It was the art. Every wall, every alcove bloomed with paintings, orchids of all kinds and colors. My lifelong obsession reflected back at me in 100 patient strokes. On a side table by a window sat a silver laptop, a single white orchid resting on the lid like a signature, tires crunched on gravel. A black SUV rolled in behind my car, and 3 men climbed out, each bearing David's features refracted through time: the nose, the eyes, the sterling posture. I shut the door and backed away from the entry. A heavy knock sounded. "Mrs. Naomi, we need to talk." My pulse drummed. David's rare comments about his family had always ended with the same advice: distance. I ignored the pounding and turned to the laptop. October 12,96, hope. The screen lit, revealing a folder labeled for Naomi. Inside, hundreds of video files dated 1 per day for a year. I clicked the first. There he was, David, before the hospital pallor, warm and alive. "Hello, my love," he said with the crooked smile that always undid me. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you came anyway. I recorded a message for every day of your first year without me. I owe you the truths I hid." Outside, the knocking paused. Murmurs filtered through the windows. 3 years ago, the video, David continued, I learned I had a cerebral aneurysm, my father's legacy. They gave me 2 to 5 years. I didn't tell you or Chloe. I wanted our time to feel normal. A hot mix of anger and sorrow swelled in me. "You're furious. And you're right to be," he said softly, as if he could see my face. "I chose love and fear over honesty. I'm sorry." Through the glass, I saw the brothers fanning papers on the porch. David's voice steadied me. "I bought this house for you. You dreamt of a place to grow orchids." I went back to the last place I thought I'd ever return to. What my brothers don't know is that I legally purchased Crestwood from our father when he was broke. He made me promise not to tell them. When Summit Resorts announced their project, suddenly they cared. He glanced off camera. "They'll come for it. In the bottom drawer of this desk is a blue folder. Everything you need is inside." A patrol car rolled up the drive. The knock returned firmer. "County officer, please open the door." I closed the laptop, grabbed the blue folder, and opened up. Officer Davis stood with Marcus and the other 2, Elijah and Isaiah. They introduced themselves, hovering behind him. "Ma'am, they have a court order to inspect the property as part of an inheritance dispute." "Of course," I said evenly, handing over the folder. "But please review my documents first." Marcus cut in smoothly. "Officer, family matters are delicate. My sister-in-law is emotional. I'm grieving," I replied, not confused. "And this is my home." The officer read in silence. The brothers' confidence thinned. Finally, he looked up. "These documents appear solid: deed transfer, notarized statements, bank records. Gentlemen, I can't enforce an inspection today. This belongs in civil court." Marcus flushed. "This is absurd." "That woman," I said, calm as winter, "is David Sterling's wife." They left with brittle courtesy, the cruiser trailing them down the drive. When the quiet returned, I reopened the laptop. Tomorrow's video thumbnail waited like a heartbeat. Whatever this place was, David had built it for me, and I intended to learn every reason why. I stayed the night, our first night at Crestwood. Sleepless beneath ceilings David had chosen and lights he'd placed to fall softly on orchids and books. At dawn, I walked the grounds. Every room carried his attention: a library lined with first editions I loved, a window seat angled to the garden just so. But the conservatory stole the morning. Sunlight poured through glass onto a living ocean of orchids, rare, finicky, dazzling. At the center, a blue cattleya I had only ever seen in catalogs stood like a quiet miracle. "Good morning," a voice said. And I nearly dropped my coffee. A woman stepped from behind a bank of blooms, sprayer in hand. "I'm Miss Jackson. Mr. David hired me to care for the collection. Naomi, I said, shaking her hand. She smiled as if recognizing a long-described friend. He talked about you often. Said you had a way with plants he couldn't match. Did you know him well? As well as he allowed anyone, she said gently. He came once a month for years, overseeing every detail himself. Worked harder the last 6 months like a man on a deadline. I breathed through the ache. His brothers were here yesterday. Her mouth thinned. They've hovered ever since the resort was announced. They mocked this place until it became valuable. She listed them with the gardener's blunt pruning, Marcus the investor who treated David like a junior associate, Elijah the lawyer with the silver tongue, Isaiah the quiet shadow. They'll be back. I murmured, double quotes, Mr. David planned for that, she said. He was always 3 steps ahead. Back inside, I opened the next video. David sat in the library I just passed through. Good morning, love. I hope you slept well, he said. Today something special. He carried the camera through a hallway to a plain door. This room is yours. The key is in the knitstand silver with a tiny orchid. I paused the video, found the key exactly where he said, and unlocked the door at the end of the east wing. Light flooded me. A full artist's studio easels, canvases, brushes, pigments bathed in perfect north light from floor to ceiling glass. I hadn't painted in 15 years. Life had asked other things of me, and I had said yes to them. On the screen, David's voice softened. You gave up your art for us. I promised myself I'd give it back. He asked me to check the bench cabinet beneath the window. Inside was an archival box holding my old paintings, the ones I thought lost in moves and leaks in time. On top, my senior self-portrait. A note in David's hand. She's still in there, Naomi. I built the space. Only you can fill it. Engines hummed on the drive. 2 CUVs, 1 black, 1 silver pulled up. The black held the brothers. The silver held Chloe. She hopped out, smiling as she shook hands with the uncle she'd never met. Whatever peace David had left me dissolved into a new resolve. The fight for Crestwood wasn't just about property anymore. It had just stepped into my family. Chloe's hug was quick, her excitement undeniable as her eyes swept across the grand living room. This place is incredible, Mom. Why did Dad never tell us? Before I could answer, Marcus stepped in with that too smooth voice. Naomi, I think yesterday's encounter was a little tense. Let's start over. We were surprised to see you here, as you must have been to see us. His polite smile didn't quite hide the sharp calculation in his eyes. Elijah and Isaiah hung back, but Elijah clutched a leather folder like it contained his entire argument. Chloe, I said firmly, ignoring Marcus. We agreed you wouldn't engage with them until we talked. They called again today, she said, defensive. Their proposal sounded reasonable. Besides, they're my family too. Family? These were strangers she'd never met until yesterday. Only because your father kept them away, I reminded her, or because he was hiding something. She shot back. The brothers seized the opening. Marcus placed a paternal hand on her shoulder. This house has always been sterling land, he said smoothly. David bought it from our father, yes, but it was meant to be shared among us one day. Elijah opened his folder with a flourish. We've drawn up a fair settlement. 1/3 for Naomi, 1/3 for Chloe, and 1/3 divided among us. Everyone wins. Chloe's eyes sparkled with youthful practicality. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell, walk away with millions, and Dad's family stays united. I locked eyes with Marcus. Your brother left Crestwood solely to me, not to share, not to divide. Marcus's mask cracked, irritation flashing before he smoothed it away. David wasn't thinking clearly in his last years. My anger rose like heat from the stone floor. My husband was clear-minded until the very end. Don't mistake secrecy for confusion. Isaiah spoke for the first time, his quiet voice cutting sharp. Then why hide it from you? Because he was building something sacred for me, I thought, glancing at the studio door, remembering the paintings. But I said only David had his reasons. None of them diminish his clarity. Chloe softened, torn between me and the uncles she barely knew. Mom, please. We could be set for life. Before I could respond, the conservatory door opened and Miss Jackson stepped in. Her eyes landed on the brothers, narrowing like shutters against a storm. Is everything all right, Mrs. Sterling? She asked. This is a family matter, Marcus snapped. She is my employee, I replied evenly. She belongs here as much as I do. Elijah scoffed. Her employment is among the disputed assets. Miss Jackson stood her ground. David hired me personally. He made me promise to care for this place and for his wife. That was enough. Gentlemen, I think it's time you left, I said. Then, turning to Chloe, you're always welcome to stay. Them not so much. Mom, you're not even going to consider their offer? Chloe pressed. I'll review any proposal with my attorney, I said. But I won't be pressured in my own home. Marcus dropped the conciliatory mask. His tone turned cold, businesslike. This property is worth tens of millions now. We can resolve this amicably or make life very difficult for you. Is that a threat? I asked, steady as stone, a reality check. You're a professor with modest means. We have resources, lawyers, influence. David put you in an impossible position. I thought of the blue folder, of David's meticulous preparation, of the videos where he explained each move like a chess master. No, I said calmly. He put me exactly where I need to be. Chloe looked stricken, caught between us. I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss. She kissed my cheek, whispered, please think about it, and left with them. When their SUVs rolled away, silence roared in the house. I felt more alone than I had since the funeral. Mrs. Sterling, Ms. Jackson said gently, there's something you should know. Something your husband asked me not to reveal unless it became necessary. I turned to her, drained but alert. What is it? Come with me, she said. It's not something we should discuss in these walls. She led me past the conservatory to a weathered shed that looked almost forgotten. Producing a heavy iron key, she unlocked the door. Inside, rakes, pots, the clutter of an ordinary gardener's shed. But at the back, she moved aside boxes to reveal a trapdoor sunk into the concrete. Your husband had this built last winter, she said. Workers thought they were digging a wine cellar. He called it the vault. A narrow ladder led us down into cool darkness. Miss Jackson flicked a switch. Fluorescent lights hummed to life, revealing a tunnel stretching into the earth. After 100 feet, it opened into a chamber lined with filing cabinets. Tables stacked with documents, walls plastered with maps. This, she said with a touch of pride, is David's war room. I stepped inside, overwhelmed. Maps of Lake Arrowhead sprawled across the walls, marked in red ink with construction zones and property lines. Sticky notes with David's neat script explained valuations and timelines. He bought this house for you. Pure and simple, Miss Jackson explained. But 2 years ago, when Summit Resorts began their studies, he hired experts. They discovered the project was much bigger than advertised. The second phase requires land that includes Crestwood. Without this property, their golf course and half their profits collapse. I traced the lines, realizing the truth. So this place is worth far more than they imagine. Exactly. And that's not all. She pulled a folder thick with paper from a cabinet. David gathered decades of evidence against his brothers, tax evasion, insider trading, embezzlement. Enough to ruin them. I leafed through the pages, David's thoroughness written in every stapled report, every notarized affidavit. He hadn't just protected me, he had built an arsenal. They're manipulating Chloe, I whispered, using grief to turn her against me. Ms. Jackson nodded. They're dangling family stories and promises of wealth. It's powerful bait for a girl who lost her father. What do I do now? I asked. That depends, she said softly. You could sell and walk away rich. Or fight them in court. Or what? Do what David always did, think 3 steps ahead. I stood before the wall of maps, a plan already forming. First, I need to meet Chloe away from them. Then my attorney. And finally, I turned to the cabinet of evidence. Summit Resorts. It's time to use the one thing my husband gave me that they don't have, foresight. Ms. Jackson smiled faintly. He knew you'd figure it out. 2 sleepless nights later, fueled by strong coffee and David's steady voice in his videos, I arranged to meet Chloe at a coffee shop in the city neutral ground. Away from Crestwood and her uncle's influence, she arrived 15 minutes late, arms crossed before she even sat down. I can't stay long. Uncle Marcus is introducing me to some investors. Uncle Marcus, I repeated softly. 3 days and already your family? They've been kind, she said defensively. More welcoming than you've been. You've treated them like enemies. I sipped my coffee, steadying myself. Do you remember that class you loved about narrative theory? How the same story changes depending on who tells it? Her eyes narrowed. What does that have to do with anything? You've only heard their version. I'm asking you to hear your father's. Dad's dead, she blurted, pain cracking through her voice. And he obviously didn't trust us enough to tell us about Crestwood. I reached into my bag, pulled out a tablet, and slid it toward her. He left something for you. For both of us. Hundreds of videos. Start with this one. She hesitated, then pressed play. David's face filled the screen, vibrant, alive. Hello, my brilliant girl, he said, eyes crinkling with that familiar smile. If you're watching, I'm gone. And you're angry because I kept secrets. You've hated secrets since you were small. Chloe's lips trembled. I should have told you about my illness, David continued. But I wanted normal years, not years spent under a cloud. I hope you can forgive me. His tone hardened. But know this, my brothers are not what they seem. They defrauded me when I was 19. Used my name on fake documents, then threatened to implicate me if I spoke up. I left, built a new life. They never changed. And they will use anyone, including you, to get what they want. The video froze on David's face. Tears slid silently down Chloe's cheeks. He was protecting us, she whispered. All this time, it was more than his illness. Yes, I said softly. Your uncles aren't a connection to him. They're opportunists. They see you as the easiest path to Crestwood. Her tears hardened into anger. They've been lying. All those stories, all that family talk, just bait. I nodded. They told you one truth, that the estate is valuable. But they didn't tell you why. Crestwood controls the second phase of the resort. Without it, the developer loses half their profits. Understanding lit her face. So they're trying to trick us? Both of us. Us, I echoed, relief blooming. That means you're back with me? I never left, she said, though shame colored her voice. I wanted to feel connected to Dad. They showed me photos, told me stories I never knew. I understand, I said, squeezing her hand. Grief makes us reach for anything that fills the hole. But now we need to be smarter together. Chloe straightened, determination sparking. For a moment, she looked so much like David, it made my heart ache. So what's the plan? First, my attorney, I said. Not the one your uncle suggests, the one David trusted. Then tomorrow, Summit Resorts. Because we know something they don't, just how much this place is worth. Chloe laughed through her tears, a sound I hadn't heard since the funeral. Dad always said you were the smartest person he ever met. Said you were quiet, but if someone underestimated you, they'd regret it. He said that? I whispered, surprised. All the time, she smiled. He also said the worst mistake anyone could make was to underestimate Naomi Sterling. That night, with Chloe at my side, I laid out the entire plan for the attorney David had recommended. He listened, eyes widening as I revealed the hidden maps, the legal records, the resort's secret second phase. "Mrs. Sterling," he said finally, "your husband told me you'd surprise me." He was right. 3 mornings later, right on cue, the Sterling brothers arrived at Crestwood. Their black SUV rolled confidently up the drive, a silver sedan following likely a consultant. I watched from the study window, no longer the grieving widow they expected, but dressed in a tailored suit, ready to be exactly what David had prepared me to be, an opponent. "They're here," I said. Chloe stepped out from the library in a navy dress, David's old watch gleaming on her wrist. "Ready?" she asked, completely. "Remember, let them corner themselves first." Miss Jackson entered quietly. "Your guests are in the dining room, as arranged." "Perfect." The bell rang. Miss Jackson opened the door. "Gentlemen, Mrs. Naomi and Chloe are waiting." Marcus led the way, Elijah clutching his ever-present folder, Isaiah silent but watchful. Behind them strode a gray-haired man in a tailored suit. "Naomi," Marcus said smoothly, "this is Mr. Chun, CFO of Sterling Investments." We thought it wise to bring an expert. How predictable. They come armed with numbers and intimidation. How thoughtful, I replied. "Follow me." In the dining room, I had arranged a long table with water bottles, neatly stacked documents, and hidden in the ceiling, a projector screen. Every detail choreographed. "Please," I gestured. "Sit. We have much to discuss." The brothers settled in, confidence radiating from every gesture. Marcus leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're glad you agreed to meet. With Mr. Chun's expertise, we can finalize a fair division of the estate's value." I remained standing at the head of the table, remote control in hand. "Division," I echoed. "Yes, let's discuss division." Marcus smirked, certain he had already won. I pressed the remote. A screen descended from the ceiling with a quiet whir. The projector lit up, revealing a full-color survey of the Crestwood Estate, every acre, every boundary, every detail. "This is Crestwood," I said evenly. "All 25 acres, not just the 10 you generously included in your proposal." Elijah shifted in his chair. "We excluded the western acres for simplicity. They're undevelopable." "How considerate," I said coolly. "Except..." I pressed the remote again. A new overlay appeared, Summit Resort's full project plan, including the secret second phase golf course sprawling directly across the undevelopable land. Mr. Chun's professional mask cracked as he leaned forward, eyes scanning the map. "Where did you get these plans?" "That's irrelevant," Marcus snapped. "Speculation at best." "Confirmed," came a new voice from the side door. The brothers whipped around as 3 suited men entered, led by none other than Mr. Alston, CEO of Summit Resorts. My attorney followed, carrying a slim briefcase. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, half rising. "This," I said pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value of Crestwood." Mr. Chun stood abruptly. "You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights." His glare could have burned holes in Marcus. "They do not," my attorney said smoothly, handing him a packet of documents. "Mrs. Sterling holds clear title. The brothers' claims are without merit." Marcus slammed his fist against the table. "This land has been in our family for generations. David had a moral obligation to share it." "Moral obligations?" Chloe's voice rang out from the far end of the table, clear and sharp. Every head turned. "Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you forged documents and stole his inheritance? When you threatened to implicate him if he spoke out?" The brothers froze. Marcus paled. Elijah's hands clenched his folder, and Isaiah looked away. Mr. Chun stared at them, appalled. Is this true? Perhaps this will clarify, I said, nodding to my attorney. He handed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. Inside lay David's meticulous records, fraudulent signatures, financial misappropriations, sworn affidavits from former employees. These are private family matters. Elijah stammered, his voice cracking. On the contrary, I replied, finally taking my seat at the head of the table. They establish a history of deception, the same deception you tried to use against me and my daughter. The silence was heavy as the brothers realized how thoroughly they'd been cornered. Their earlier bravado crumbled, replaced by fear. What do you want, Naomi? Marcus asked at last, his voice stripped of charm. I want you gone, I said simply. You will cease contesting the will, stop contacting Chloe, and abandon any claim to Crestwood. In exchange, David's files stay private. Mr. Chun stood, gathering his papers. I was misled into this meeting under false pretenses, Mrs. Sterling. I'll reach out directly about legitimate negotiations. He shot the brothers a final look of contempt before striding out. Mr. Alston of Summit Resorts remained. Mrs. Sterling, Crestwood is critical to our expansion. We're prepared to make a substantial offer. Perhaps, I said calmly, but under my terms: responsible development, preservation of the conservatory and studio, and respect for this land. The brothers bristled, but their power had bled out of the room. Chloe caught my eye and gave me the smallest smile, half pride, half relief. The meeting had begun as their ambush. It ended as my victory. The Sterling brothers left Crestwood 2 hours later, their SUV trailing dust down the drive. Marcus's face was crimson with rage, Elijah's folder clutched tighter than ever, and Isaiah's silence heavier than words. They'd arrived as predators. They departed as men exposed, outmaneuvered, and powerless. Beside me, Chloe let out a long breath she'd been holding. I can't believe that just happened. You did well, I told her, squeezing her hand. Your father would have been proud of you. Miss Jackson joined us in the hall, her expression calm, but her eyes alight. They underestimated you, Mrs. Sterling, just as Mr. David always knew they would. I looked out at the fading dust on the road. They'll be back, I said. But now they know Crestwood isn't undefended. That night, Chloe and I sat in the library, the fire crackling softly as we opened the laptop again. David's next video appeared, his eyes warm, his voice steady. Naomi, Chloe, if you're watching this together, it means you've found your strength. That was always my hope. My brothers will test you, but together, you are unshakable. Chloe leaned her head on my shoulder, tears glistening, but her voice steady. I believe him now. He really did plan for everything. The following weeks blurred with meetings, paperwork, and negotiations. Summit Resorts tried to press for a full purchase, but I refused. Instead, I crafted an agreement that prioritized environmental preservation, protected the conservatory and art studio, and guaranteed that Crestwood's history would not be erased for profit. The negotiators were baffled. Mrs. Sterling, no one in this industry insists on such terms. One remarked, then it's time someone did. I replied, to my surprise. Mr. Alston respected my stance. Your husband told me once that you were a woman of principle. Now I see what he meant. We'll find a way to make this work. Chloe began spending more time at Crestwood, helping Miss Jackson with the orchids, reading in the library, even painting with me in the studio. The house that had started as David's secret gift was slowly becoming ours. Every morning we watched David's daily videos together. Some were practical instructions, others intimate reflections, always ending with his quiet smile. In them, I heard not just the man I lost, but the partner who believed in the woman I was still becoming. One crisp autumn morning, sunlight streaming through the studio windows. Chloe appeared at the door holding a laptop. "Mom," she said softly, "today's video is different. I think you should watch it alone." Curious, I set down my brush and pressed play. David sat in the unfinished studio months before its completion. "My love," he began, "if you're watching this, it means you've picked up a brush again. That makes me happier than words can say." Tears stung my eyes. "This room isn't the inheritance," he continued, "nor is the house or even the land. The real inheritance is freedom, the chance to become more fully yourself. I gave you the tools. Only you can choose what to create." He leaned closer, his gaze steady. "In the closet is a blank canvas I commissioned. When you're ready, paint something that captures Crestwood, not just as it is, but what it means to you. Let it be your voice." The video ended, leaving silence thick with love and expectation. I walked to the closet, found the massive, untouched canvas, and ran my hands across its surface. For the first time in years, I felt not just grief, but possibility. For weeks, the blank canvas haunted me. I sketched draft after draft, none of them good enough. I wanted to capture not just the house, but the layers of history, loss, and love that lived within its walls. One morning, as I watched Chloe tend to the orchids in the conservatory, sunlight catching her hair in a way that echoed David's smile, inspiration struck. I began painting tentative strokes at first, then with growing certainty. The house emerged first, solid and proud, rendered in fine detail. Behind it, faint translucent layers, the broken ruins David had first bought, and beneath that, the house of his childhood, shadowed and fragile. Deeper still, the land itself, oak trees, roots, an earth that had seen generations rise and fall dot in the foreground. Two figures appeared, a woman and a young woman, their features blurred just enough to represent both us and anyone who had ever inherited grief and turned it into strength. Behind them, subtle but unmistakable, a third figure, a man holding a rare blue orchid, offering it forward. When the final stroke dried, I stepped back, tears in my eyes. It wasn't just a painting. It was a story of survival, of reclamation, of legacy. With Miss Jackson's help, we hung the painting in the great room above the fireplace. Chloe stood beside me, her eyes shimmering. "It's Dad," she whispered. "And us, the past, the present, and the future." "Legacy," I said softly. "Not what is left behind, but what continues forward." That evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, I felt David's presence not as a ghost, not as a wound, but as a partner whose love had outlived him. Crestwood was no longer just his secret. It was our home, our future. The resort negotiations stabilized. Our attorney finalized settlements, ensuring the brothers could never touch Crestwood again. Chloe returned to her studies, but came back often, no longer under her uncle's sway, but anchored in her father's true legacy. For the first time since his passing, peace began to grow roots inside me. Months later, the doorbell rang. Miss Jackson answered, her cautious expression alerting me before she even spoke. "It's Marcus," she whispered. "He's alone." My heart clenched. "Does he have papers?" "No, he says he wants just a few minutes." I stepped onto the porch. Marcus looked thinner, older, his arrogance tempered into something that resembled humility. "Naomi," he said quietly, "thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Marcus?" Our agreement was clear. I'm not here to contest anything. His eyes dropped. "I'm here to apologize. Of all the outcomes I imagined, that wasn't one." I folded my arms, waiting. "I've made mistakes," he said. "More than I can count. I wanted power, money, control. David? He was always better than me, and I hated him for it. Now I don't have time to hate anymore." A shadow passed across his face. "Stage 4 cancer?" Not much time left. It puts things in perspective. For a long moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the wind through the trees David had loved. Finally, Marcus reached into his pocket and held out a small packet. "I found this in our father's things," he said. Inside was a faded photograph, 3 boys under a massive oak tree, young David clutching a tiny orchid in a clay pot dot. I stared at the photo in my hands. 3 brothers frozen in time. David, the smallest, smiling proudly with his orchid. The same orchid his brothers later destroyed just to wound him. "Would you like to see the conservatory?" I asked quietly, surprising even myself. Marcus blinked, then nodded. "If you'll allow it." We walked in silence through the gardens. Inside, the conservatory bloomed in full splendor, rows of rare orchids glowing under the morning sun. Marcus stopped in his tracks, awe softening the hard lines of his face. "He built this?" he whispered. "For me," I said simply. He swallowed, eyes damp. "I wanted to take it from you." From him. But standing here, I see what he created, and what I nearly destroyed. For the first time, I saw not the arrogant investor who tried to steal Crestwood, but a man carrying regrets too heavy to undo. Compassion stirred within me, unexpected but undeniable. "Forgiveness won't erase the past," I said carefully. "But maybe it can soften it." Marcus nodded, his voice breaking. "That's more than I deserve." "Thank you." When he left, the air in Crestwood shifted as if a final weight had lifted. I carried the old photo into the great room, placed it beneath my painting, and lit a candle. That evening, I opened David's laptop and found the last video. My hands trembled as I pressed play. David appeared, older than in the earlier recordings, but peaceful. His eyes held a serenity I'd never seen in life. "My love," he began softly, "if you're watching this, it means you've walked the path I hoped you would. You've faced them. You've chosen strength. And maybe, just maybe, you've found yourself again." I pressed my hand to the screen, tears flowing freely. "This is my final message," he continued. "But it isn't the end of us. We live on in Chloe, in the choices you'll make, and the beauty you'll create. Crestwood was my burden once. Now it is your freedom." He smiled, that crook smile that had always undone me. "Never forget, Naomi, you were always the true strength between us. Until someday, my love." The screen went dark. Silence wrapped around me, not empty this time, but full of love, of memory, of possibility. I sat for a long time in the quiet, gazing at the painting on the wall. Layers of past, present, and future merged on the canvas, just as they did within me. David had given me more than a property or financial security. He had given me the chance to rediscover myself. In the weeks that followed, I painted daily. Chloe helped Miss Jackson tend to the orchids, laughter returning slowly to her voice. We created new routines, new traditions, in the house David once feared, but ultimately transformed. Crestwood was no longer a secret or a battlefield. It was our sanctuary. Sometimes, when the evening light poured golden through the windows, I felt David's presence beside me, not as a ghost, but as a partner in every decision, every brushstroke, every breath of this new life. The promise I had once made to stay away had become the very key to my future. And in honoring it, by breaking it, I found not just the truth of my husband, but the truth of myself. Winter settled gently over Crestwood, blanketing the gardens in silver frost. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the orchid's steady bloom created a cocoon of life and memory. Chloe and I fell into a rhythm, mornings spent watching David's older videos, afternoons filled with study, painting, or tending the plants, evenings shared with stories and laughter that slowly returned to us. One night, Chloe looked up from her book and asked, "Did you ever imagine this, Mom? That Dad's secret would become our whole future?" I smiled faintly. "Never. But that's what love does, Chloe. It plants seeds in silence. And one day, when you least expect it, they bloom. She reached across the table, her hand clasping mine. I think he knew you'd be able to handle all of it. Even the battles. Her faith warmed me. For so long, I had doubted my own strength. But through David's careful planning and through my own choices, I had become the woman he always believed I was. Spring returned, and with it, renewal. The resort agreement finalized under my terms. The conservatory was legally untouchable, the studio protected, the land preserved in ways no developer could compromise. Crestwood would remain a sanctuary, not just for us, but for generations to come. Miss Jackson stayed on, more than an employee, now a friend. A guardian of the orchids, a witness to David's legacy. Together we celebrated small victories, the first blossom of a rare orchid, Chloe's acceptance into a graduate program, my first public art showing in decades. As the seasons turned, I no longer felt like a widow clinging to memories. I felt like a woman stepping into her second life, one David had built quietly, lovingly, so I could flourish long after he was gone. One evening, standing before the great painting in the living room, Chloe and I lingered in silence. She traced the faint outline of the man in the background, the orchid in his hands. He's still here, she whispered. Yes, I agreed. Not in body, but in everything he left us. We walked out onto the porch, the sunset painting the sky in amber and rose. I thought of David's last words. You were always the true strength between us. For years, I had lived in his quiet shadow, believing he carried the weight of us. Now I saw the truth's strength had always been shared, passed back and forth, tested in fire, and finally revealed in love. The house he once begged me to avoid had become the home of my rebirth. The secret he carried became my inheritance, and the promise he made me break became the door to my freedom. Legacy, I murmured to Chloe, my eyes on the horizon. It isn't what we leave behind, it's what continues forward. And at Crestwood Estate, David's legacy and mine was only just beginning.